Well, hey, everybody, we're so glad to have you in the house. And if you're online, it's great to have you with us as well. Hey, if you're online, do this for me right now. Go ahead and hit that share button if you haven't already, if you're having a great time so far, and maybe you want someone to get a word in your life that's a friend of yours. I tell you this right now, that's my prayer, and that's my hope for this time we have together, is that God is going to speak a word into your life. I know He's done that in mine as I've been preparing for this series we're going to be going through for the next 3 weeks. And I'm excited to hang out with you and talk about what it means to be living the dream. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had maybe you're familiar with that phrasing because people say it pretty frequently these days. For me, it happens quite a bit because you'll talk to somebody and you'll go, hey, how's things going, man? And then the things start progressing and ultimately they just go, man, I'm just living the dream. I'm living the dream. And I don't know about you, but I walk away from that moment and I go, what does that even mean? Like when somebody says that to you, what do they mean by that? And what's even worse is I've said it like a lot, like to people, and I don't know it. Like I walk away, I was like, what did I even say to that person? Like, what was that even about? Like, I'm like, things are going good, I guess. Maybe that's what that means. And so I've just kind of processed it, and I find it very funny phrase. And I'll tell you, the place that it hit me the most is that as I process it, you know, just the concept of being a dreamer, and maybe you're aspiring to something in your life, and the idea that like you're already living that, right? Oh, I'm already in the midst of my dream, maybe something like that. And as I processed it more and more, I thought about every facet of what that looks like. And then something happened in my life that really hit me between the eyes when it came to this subject. So I'll tell you this, I am a dreamer. I don't know if you're a dreamer out there and you're that way and it's just inward. Maybe you're one of those people who has like a shirt or something or an inspirational, it's like, I'm a dreamer. Like that might be you. I don't know, I'm not quite that far down the rabbit hole, but like maybe that's you. And hey, do this for me right now. If that's you and you're already with me right now, just turn to the person next to you and whisper, I'm a dreamer. Like just do that real quick instead of, I see it, there's some dreamers out there. I see you guys. Do it in the comments as well. Absolutely, yeah. Some of you, you're just intrinsically dreamers. Like you are just, to the point that sometimes your friends and family are like, hey, with me, here. We're all in this room right now. Don't know where you are or what planet you're on, but we're here. It's like, I'm dreaming. Like you're just somewhere else aspiring to other things. I get that way, big time. Can I just tell you? I think about all these cool things that I would love to see happen in my life and love to occur. I've had a number of things happen that I've dreamed about that have even come to pass, and then I'm hoping other things in my life. But one thing I dream a lot about, and I love leading up to these builds and then completely letting all of you down. Is what it boils down to. I build this and then I say something that I'm all about and you're like, really? Like that was the thing for you? And it's like, yeah, I'm a weird person. I dream about my basement. That's what I dream about. I don't know, like maybe you're not following me. I think some of the dudes might feel me though, because here's the deal. That's like my man cave, my space. Mississippi, fun fact, where I'm from, no basements, not a thing. It's just, we're too close to the water table. It just doesn't work when you're that close to the Gulf Coast. And so we just don't have any. And so when I finally moved to a house where we had a basement and my wife was like, this is your space. Everything north of the ground is my space. Like that was, I went, what, I have a space? Like I now have a space? Like I can do what I want with it? And I just went to town. And I joked that my basement is like the TGI Fridays vibe, or maybe for us here more locally, it's like the 54th Street vibe. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like just a bunch of random pop culture garbage all over the walls and it doesn't really all go together. Like you walk up, you're like, why are your engagement pictures next to Donald Duck? I don't understand, but because it works, that's why. But also is that a real airplane propeller next to Baby Yoda? Yeah, it is, and it's working, okay? And I just consequently keep putting just more ridiculousness and putting it all together. All right, this is not the most masculine thing in the world to admit. I have a Pinterest board for my basement. Can I be real with you? Of like how I would love it to be one day. Like where I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Yes, pin it. Like, and I accrue these things and I'm loving it. But my basement isn't what I want it to be. It's cool, it's great, but I've got so much more I want to see with that bad boy. And I just aspire to it being this epic basement. And one day we were getting our dishwasher fixed because it's garbage, and the guy was at our house fixing it because I don't work well with that. And so he came in, and it turns out like our water stuff was messed up too. So whenever he was trying to work on the dishwasher, it would just spew hot lava all over him. And so he was like, "We need to turn the water off." I was like, "That sounds great because you have third-degree burns." And so we went downstairs into the basement. My not done, not where it needs to be. I mean, it's cool, whatever, but like it's got so much more potential that it's going to be. And we head down there to find the valve to turn it off, and he just stops at the base of the stairs and looks around with his jaw open. And I like stop, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he goes, "Man, this would be like my dream. Like, dude, you're living the dream, man. This is the most epic basement I have ever seen. Like, if I could plan a basement right now, it would be this basement." And it punched me right between the eyes. Because for me, it's not good enough. It's not where it needs to be. It's got so much more. I got so many dreams for this goofy basement. And this other guy walks down into mine, and he goes, "But this is my dream." And it overwhelmed me because I realized, whether we want to admit it or not, when it comes to our contentment in our life and heading towards whatever God has for us, in so many instances, you might not realize it, but you're living someone else's dream right now, even though it feels like something far different to you. I mean, quite frankly, we can just base it down to the most fundamental level of what it means to be anyone, most likely, who's tuning into this or in the room. You're an American citizen who lives in America. You know how many people dream about coming to America and being in our country? Some of you right now in the climate of things are like, "Do they really though?" But like it is. Like, so many people want to be here desperately. So just being here, you're living someone else's dream. Let alone all the other facets of your life, many of which that you and I take for granted any day of the week. And so as I looked at that, and I looked at this concept of contentment, but I also looked at the reality of aspiring to these God envisioned things for your life, I wanted to go, well, how do we dream? And how do we have dreams that are God-inspired, not self-indulgent? And there tends to be a fine line there if we're not careful. And so in this series, we're going to look at that. We're going to look at this idea of contentment. We're going to look at this idea of defining the God-inspired dreams for your life. Now, if you're like me, you've got dreams that you hope are going to come to pass. And as I said earlier, you got some that have come to pass. Some that have come to pass for me would be, I always wanted to have a wife. I wanted to have a spouse, and I prayed about that and all those things. Really wanted that. Felt like that was something God wanted for my life. And sure enough, God gave me an amazing, awesome, best wife. She's probably best wife, brownie points, that has ever been, okay? Like, you're like, "But my wife's great." Your wife's not as good as my wife. Like, my wife's better. Like, yeah, I'm sure she's fine. I'm sure you have a great wife. But I am telling you right now that, like, I'm so blessed. But the question becomes, whenever it comes to that aspirational dream of having that, did I want her because I first got myself right with the Lord? She got herself right with the Lord and grew as an individual and found her identity in Him, and then came together because it was God's will for her life? Or did I just cling and claw at something because I just didn't want to be alone? That was the dream was just, I just needed someone for the sake of needing someone. Was that it? Or was it because it was in alignment with what God would have for my life? And I'm very thankful that that's where it was in that narrative. But what does that look like for you in your stories thus far? Maybe you're single and you're looking and aspiring to that, but check the motives behind where you're at and what you're looking for. Motives are going to play a huge role in what we're talking about. Beyond that, I always aspired, and this is not going to be a shock to most any of you. It is what it is. I'm very nerdy. I aspired so much to be like a critically acclaimed comic book artist and author. I really badly wanted that for my life. Just so we're all clear, it did not happen. If you were, you're like, did he though? No, he did not. He did not. And some of you are going, that was probably when he was 8 years old. And like, that's so cute. It was really not that long ago, actually, is what it boils down to. Like, it was like, you'd be like, oh, okay, all right, yeah. It was not that long ago, but it didn't happen. And I don't dream for that anymore, okay? So if all of my identity, all I was wrapped up in that accomplishment, that thing I was dreaming towards, that clearly wasn't God's will for my life, would I have found fulfillment? No, because it would have been tied up in something that wasn't to be. I'll tell you other things I dream about and I hope will happen one day. I would love to, like, this is a fun one. I would love to be a published author. I think that would be crazy cool. In any number of, you'd be like, maybe it'll be like in like Christian books. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it'll be like fiction. That would be crazy cool. Like there's some like Lord of the Rings, but Seth's version. Like it'd be so cool. I'd love it. Something like that. But who knows if that'll happen? Maybe. I would love to, this is the country boy in me. I would love to own like my forever home. I would love to have a forever home. That's such a white people term. I would love to have a forever home on a big plot of land with a pond. I would love that. Like I'd just be out there just like my country boy self, just fishing in that little pond. At the end of the day, sunset going, oh, yes, perfect. Like I would love that one day. My wife and I dream about having a big family one day, just a whole bunch of kids, like 5 to 6. The number she keeps adding like 1 to it about every year. I don't know why that keeps happening, but she's like 1. And everybody was like, wait until you have your first kid. That did not slow her down at all. Quite frankly, just so we're on the same page, we just announced it. We're pregnant with number 2 right now, is what that boils down to, which was not planned. To be clear, just if you're doing the math in your head, that will make them 14 months apart. Yeah. And if you're also doing the double math on that, it was a quarantine baby. That's right. We did not properly social distance. So we do have our second kiddo on the way. And some people have been messing with me. And they're like, Seth, don't you know what causes that? And the answer is yes, but she won't leave me alone. But I keep telling her I have a headache. She doesn't listen. It's a whole problem. So, yeah, that's absolutely how it happened. It's definitely not the other way around. So moving on. We aspire to that. But the question is, if our hope is in having this big family one day, and that's like, we're all in on that, and that's what we want above all else. If we only end up having 2 kids, but we wanted so much more, are we going to feel unfulfilled, not finding joy because we dreamt for that, but it didn't happen? And so what does it look like to find fulfillment in the wake of these things? For you and for me, it might look different though. So for you, it might be something, maybe yours is like real life, like you want to be the head of a Fortune 500 company. You want to have multiple degrees, like in all these kind of fields. Maybe you want to maybe it's not like head of some CEO of a company. Maybe it's just you want to own your own business. Maybe it's that you do want to get married, like we said. Maybe it's you want to have kids too, just like we said earlier. Maybe it's that you want to rectify a relationship. Maybe it's with your parent or with one of your children that just has not been working. I could just go on. Maybe it's something like I want to bet my name in lights. I want to be famous. I want all these things to happen for me. And you've got all these dreams, but what if they don't happen? Or what if they do? In the midst of both of those sides of the way that could go, how does fulfillment and how does contentment play out? Not just when you reach the goal and the dream, but in the midst of living in the now, leading up to wherever that's going. I'll tell you, that is heavy on me as I think through this subject matter. And today we're going to be looking through the life of Joseph in Scripture in Genesis 37. And I'm really excited to see how that goes because we've actually talked about Joseph a while ago. It was like over a year or so I preached on Joseph, but I did this daunting thing where I went through his entire narrative in the entire book of Genesis in one talk. And in so doing, we had to skip past some of the most major elements of what are going on in his narrative that are massively powerful. So for the next 3 weeks, we're going to lean in heavily into the details of this man's life and how he aspired and dreamt for so many things and how that narrative played out for his betterment in some instances and not so great in others, but how God worked for good in the end regardless. So if you were to take anything away from what I'm saying, if you're the scientific method person, the hypothesis we'll be working from for this whole discussion is as follows. It's this. It's essential to determine a godly trajectory if we ever hope to have a fulfilling target. If we ever hope to hit that fulfilling target. It's essential to determine a godly trajectory if we ever hope to hit a godly target. And what do I mean by that? It's the reality that everyone anywhere is going to tell you they want to find fulfillment in their life. In any number of ways, they just want to know what that fulfillment and joy comes from that. It's happiness generally, like this target of it, like we all want to hit that target. And we've got so many ways we're trying to do it, and the problem is there's only one trajectory that's going to hit that target, but we think, I'm going to aim over here with this trajectory, and I think that'll still get me no targets over here, but I'll aim over here, and that, but I'll do get this, and this thing will get me to fulfillment, and I'll do that, this, and that, and godliness and what God has for your life and his will is the only trajectory that's going to hit right where you need it to hit, if you want to find fulfillment. And that, my friends, is what we are going to look at today. So let's dive into Genesis 37. If you've got a copy of God's Word, go ahead and open that up. As you're doing this, can I tell you that the way this is going to manifest in this story isn't even exclusively within the bounds of what it means for you simply to dream for yourself. There's another side of dreaming that a lot of us don't tend to think about that we're going to see happen in this specific passage today, because there's two characters that I want you to focus on today. Not just Joseph, but his father Israel. And what happens is, and it's been an interesting thing for me to see throughout the years and come to a newer understanding of it now being a parent, but sometimes the way that dreaming manifests isn't even simply for yourself. But sometimes you have dreams for other people in their lives. Maybe it's something that you have that you're aspirationally hoping for your spouse. Maybe it's something that you're hoping for your child. And that's the one probably that manifests the most. That's where you get the kind of vicariously living through your child dynamic that gets it's kind of more unhealthy manifestation of it. It becomes this, I thought I would find fulfillment in this. I didn't make it work. It didn't happen. I wanted to be a pro baseball player. I wanted to do this, that, and the other. Or I wanted to make it in this field. Or I want to be successful in this way. And I wasn't. But man, what if my kid could be? It's definitely for them, though. It's not because I want that in any way, and it's about me in any way. Like, it's really just for them because I want to speak that in them and blah, blah. Like, what if it's that? And here's the conversion. So that's the unhealthy end of it, but there's also good ones. Maybe you just, man, I dream that my kid will, get married one day and have kids, and I have grandkids, and like, I dream. Those aren't bad things, but the question when we're dreaming, not just for ourselves, but for others, is what then becomes our motivation for it? And is it just something we intrinsically want for ourselves that's self-indulgent? Or is it something that's for someone else? And if you're on the opposite end of that, namely the receiving end, if somebody else has a dream for your life, are you living their dream for you or God's dream for you? And you have to make sure you're weighing those things in your mind. And we're going to see that play out to a certain extent in Joseph's narrative with his father Israel. So Genesis 37, what's happened is Israel up to this point, he was originally named Jacob, but his name gets changed in the midst of his crazy story. And Israel has some pretty clear problems in his life. He was very deceptive early on in his life, which caught up to him in a number of ways. The most intense way was his father-in-law was more deceptive than even he was, and so he kind of conned him into a number of things. Israel fell in love with a girl named Rachel, but the problem is her older sister Leah was not married, and the dad went, well, I want Leah to get married, and I know that Israel wants to marry Rachel. So what I'll do is I'll cover Leah with a veil and let him get married to her, and then he's locked in and he can't do anything about it, and I'll just tell him it's Rachel. So sure enough, it happens. He gets married to Leah. He's like, what have you done to me? And he goes, well, if you work for me for even more, I'll give you my other daughter. And so sure enough, he ends up marrying Rachel. This does not go well because what we see characterized within Israel is a heart of favoritism. And moving forward, you're going to see Israel constantly, he blatantly says Rachel's his favorite. He loves her more than all the rest in his life. And then we're going to see this pan out again because he had many sons, but it was the firstborn son of Rachel who was not the firstborn son of all the sons. He ended up having 12 sons. And it was Joseph, the firstborn son of Rachel, that he blatantly says, I love him more than all my other sons. And he treated him as if he was one that would be the heir to heir apparent, which was really not setting him up for a win, as you're about to see. So Genesis 37:1, Jacob or Israel lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them, okay? Brought their father a bad report about him. First characteristic of Joseph you need to realize is he's a rat. He's a tattletale. Like, he is the little brother that comes out of nowhere with all his other brothers. He's like, Dad, did you see what they did? They did this. And they're like, we hate him. We don't like him. He is not our favorite brother. Some of you are like, don't look. If you have siblings here right now, don't look at them. Stop looking at them right now. Yeah, stop it. Somebody like, that's you, we hate you. No, don't do that. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. Bad deal. Don't do that. Parent advice number one, can I just tell you right now? I have so many years of parenting under my belt, it's crazy. I'm an expert. Can I tell you that right now? And let me tell you this. Don't tell your, like, I'm not at all, obviously. I got a 9-month-old. But I can tell you this much. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out this is not a great parenting strategy, all right? Don't ever look at your kids and be like, I love you more. And as you're going to see, he literally does something horrible with it. Because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. You're going to see this word hate show up 3 separate times in this section of their description of their feelings for their brother. Their dad, not only did he intrinsic, in some of your households, can we be real? Some of you probably, and this is whether you're a kid or you're a grown adult, you kind of have that, and some of you live in the tension of, we need to do a whole talk on that kind of baggage one day, but you live in the tension of, everybody knows that Sandra's loved more than the rest of us. Everybody knows it. In our family, it's just, nobody's ever said it, but we all know. It's that kind of deal, and you walk in that tension, all right? That's not just what's at play here. Their dad literally gave him a physical representation that's like a giant coat that has pretty much giant letters on the back that say, I love Joseph more than all of you. He literally gave him something to go, I love you more. And if anybody questions it, let the whole world know. This is it. This is my sign. I love you more. Great parenting out the gates. And as we're going to see, it is this vicariousness through he has this aspiration for his son Joseph. He is kind of putting things on him and hopes and dreams for his future that Joseph doesn't necessarily even want to step into. Or if he does, it would be in an unhealthy light, as we're going to see in some instances. And it's not setting him up for a win at all. And it's going to set him on a pretty rough trajectory. 5, Joseph had a dream. So Joseph wasn't just a dreamer from the standpoint of aspiring to things. We're talking true blue dreams, like going to sleep and seeing things. Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. One thing that's interesting about this story, if you've ever studied the story of Joseph, is there's a lot about this story that gets a little bit interesting because we try to build the character of Joseph into this monumental man of faith. And yes, by the end of the story, that's what he was. But there's not a single positive godly character quality that is listed at the beginning of his narrative. Quite frankly, all we see are really negative, not so great things. We see Joseph as one who's falling, not only is he being favored by his father, but he's leaning into it to a certain degree. Beyond that, there's nothing that says God told him, you should tell your brothers this and rub them in their face. We're going to see that this is a God-inspired dream in his life, but his motivation is very flawed. And it's very him-driven, and he's going, let me tell you what I'm going to be and what's going to happen. God never says in any part of this story, Joseph, go to your brothers and tell them all these things. But Joseph was like, let me tell them, because it's going to be really cool. 9, then he had another dream, and he told it to his brother. He did it again. He knows they hate him. And he had another dream, and he goes, I'm going to go, I know they hate me, but if I tell them another dream, maybe no, you're dumb, Joseph. What are you even thinking? And he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream. And this time, the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now, this is interesting right here in those two comparisons. Lots of negative emotions coming at Joseph and his brothers. But that phrasing at the end is a cross-reference foreshadowing to Mary when she has Jesus. There's two instances in the beginning of that story whenever Mary talks about she stored up all these things in her heart. And it's moments that God was doing something really cool in the life of her child. And it's more or less she paused and held that inward like, I'm excited about what God's doing. So the connotation here is not one of negativity. It's when Joseph stands by it, it's aspirational. It's his father going, wow, I was right. He is that amazing. I'm validating my love for loving him more. And I see so much in his future. He's even having dreams of how he's going to do it. And if it wasn't even worse enough, Joseph only went to his brothers whenever he was talking about like wheat in a field bowing and rising up. Now he's like, okay, I don't know if they understood it fully whenever I said wheat in a field. So I'm just going to tell them the galaxy is going to bow to me, and maybe that'll get the message across that I'm better than them. Like they'll understand then, and then peace will happen. No, you're dumb, Joseph. Like, what are you thinking? And so that brings us to point one, which is simply we must assess our motives. And we're going to look at three quick things that are filters by which you can use to determine whether or not this God-inspired dream you have is just that, God-inspired or self-indulgent. And the first one we're going to see is that we got to assess our motives. Quite arguably, this is the most important one. Joseph has a really rough story that we're going to see pan out over these next 3 weeks if you include this one. And it's bad what he has to go through. And God can accomplish in him whatever he wants to. But the problem is Joseph sets himself up for failure from the get-go in so many ways and makes his journey that much more difficult because he was running so much of what he was dealing with through this personal-driven agenda. His motivations were self-indulgent. He was ratting on his brothers and tattling on them constantly. He was, he was indulging in that favoritism. He was saying, look at what I'm going to be. Look at this, I'm having this God-sized dream. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how are you manifesting that in your own life? Are you speaking things into your children in an unhealthy way? Are you yourself walking towards the dreams you have in a way that is rubbing it in other people's faces? Because at the end of the day, if you really did a big, deep self-assessment, it's a little bit more about you feeling validated and you getting what you think you need to get than it is about glorifying God or loving others. Or it's just, but I want this, and I think if I just get this, because I deserve it, if I'm being honest, then I'll be fulfilled, then I'll be happy. And we have to do a pretty severe self-check to make sure that godliness and being in alignment with what God would have for us is where we're aiming to find fulfillment, and not in something else. It's something self-driven and self-motivated. Let's keep reading and see how Joseph screws this up even more. Genesis 37:12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. This is also obviously a correlation to earlier. His dad will send him out. He gets word on his brothers. He goes rats on his brothers. It's not a good situation. Secondly, what we're going to see happen, and I'm going to skip this, is that he literally goes to the place they're supposed to be, and they're not there. They've gone somewhere else. So they're kind of not where they're supposed to be. So he's going to be going to where his brothers are, and the intention in their mind is, oh, the rat's back. We're not where we're supposed to be, and he's going to go tattle on us to Dad. So they're already in a negative headspace when they see him. So 17, so Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Well, that just escalated. Here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns. It's this kind of large pit that collects water, and this one happened to be dry. and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Two things you need to kind of bring into account there. One is just fun. I would love to be present for so many conversations that led to certain things. In Scripture otherwise, because I just don't think we contextually think about what had to happen. You've got all these brothers sitting together. They see their brother coming, and one of them had to be the guy that broke the silence. And I just imagine he's sitting there and he goes, guys, I'm just going to say something right now. And you're probably going to think I'm crazy. Just tell me if I'm wrong in this. We all hate Joseph, right? Oh, yeah, no, he's bad. I don't like him. Yeah, he is the worst. He's probably going to go tell Dad that we're here instead of over in Shechem. It's ridiculous. I don't like that guy. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, all on the same page. That's great. All right. Crazy thought. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm just going to say it out loud. I'm going to throw it out there in the universe, and you guys just do with it what you will. Should we maybe kill him? Like, could we do that? Could we get away with that? And they're like, thank you. Finally, somebody said it. Yes, let's kill him. Oh, yeah, that's a high air 5 from here. Yes, absolutely. Kill him dead. I'm on board with that. And they just build off each other, and they decide that they're going to kill their own brother. Like, they land in this headspace. But what's interesting to me is what they call him, the nickname. Here comes that dreamer. They did not say, here comes Dad's favorite. Here comes the favored one. They said, here comes the dreamer. Why? Because it wasn't their father's favoritism that pushed them over the edge. It was when Joseph validated it. When he looked down on them, when his motives were clear that even though their father felt that way, he was right there with their dad. And he wasn't, and they were not about it. And what's about to happen is they are about to do some rough stuff to Joseph. 2 is this: we must cling to God despite life's upsets. Joseph's life is about to get really upset in that moment. I mean, his own family is plotting to kill him. Let's be real. That's like, you're like, well, I've got some family issues I need to. Really, though? Have they tried to kill you yet? Like, all of them? Like, they all just get, you're like, okay, well, not that yet. So, you at least got that going for you, right? He is not doing well. He's about to get real upset in his life, and it's going to get worse, foreshadowing for you. Like, we've got some rough areas we're going to have to go through that poor Joseph is going to have to deal with. But the first thing we're going to start seeing about Joseph's character that's positive, and it's going to be a consistent theme, is that in the midst of all this, he clings to God and knows that he's faithful. In the midst of so many upsets, and this is not going to be the last one. And so the question I have to ask you is, if you are pursuing a dream that you know God's put in you, you know that your motives are right, you've already run it through that filter, well, if bad things happen that upset that, do you just give up? What if not just one bad thing happens? What if 2? What if 3? What if 4? What if they're debilitatingly bad? Do you just give up? Or because you know your motives are pure, because you know it's what God wants you to do with your life, you say, I'm not going to give up on this. I'm going to cling to God. I'm going to cling to his promises. He will be my refuge. We've talked about that. And I'm going to keep cruising. You have to make sure we cling to God despite life's upsets. As the story continues, Joseph ends up in this real rough situation where his brothers kind of ease up. And instead of trying to kill him, they go, you know what? One of them talks sense into him, and they say, well, what if we just sell him into slavery? I mean, they literally go, he is our own flesh and blood. Like, he's our brother. So, like, it makes more sense to sell him into slavery than it does to actually kill him. Because, like, that's how logic works. Yeah, they're like, we do, like, we love him, like, in the family word, where, like, it's like a lower L love and not, like, a real one. And so we should, like, totally just sell him into slavery. And so they do. And then they decide to take that favoritism robe, tear it up, and take it back to their dad and be like, a lion ate him. There are lions here, right? A lion ate him. Like, that's the deal. And so 31 is what it says right here. It says, then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe. He recognized it and said, it is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. And then Jacob tore his clothes. Put on sackcloth. This is a sign of mourning and just debilitating, just depression and anxiety and just overwhelmingness that they would do as a physical representation of this back in Old Testament times. Put on sackcloth and mourn for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, which is the foreshadowing of what's coming next week. And this is who he's going to be in the house enslaved to. 3 is this. It's the final point. We must find our fulfillment in God, not the ill intent of others. So when you aspire to God's will for your life, when you have that God-inspired dream and you know that's what it is, and you know your motives are right, and you begin to deal with the fact that life is just life and you're going to have upsets and you're enduring those, the thing that's the most difficult in the midst of those upsets isn't necessarily intangible things, it's the people. When the relationships and the people and those out there that they come to hurt you and they have ill intent. Can we be real? If you rub things in people's face in a not so great character way like Joseph did, people are going to come for you in a real rough way. But can I also be real with you? If things are just going really well for you and you are pursuing the dream that you have in your life that God has for you, they're also going to come for you because they don't like that. They don't like that you're finding joy if they're not. They don't like that you're attaining the thing that God has for your life and you don't. Then there's going to be some jealousy, some animosity. And so either way you slice it, people are going to come for you. And many of you experience this in life when people just see something going well for you in your life and they come and try to just knock your legs out from under you. And your fulfillment, if you're not careful, gets wrapped up in the way people see you, perceive you, interact with you. And yes, we're culpable for our actions, but you got to make sure that your dream is not debilitated by the actions of someone else. And what's interesting here at the end is that Joseph is about to take a turn for the better, thankfully. His life's going to get upset. All of his family, the people who should care about him, are going to try to debilitating mess up his life, and they have a real bad intent for him. And he's going to finally start to get some decent character and go, I'm going to cling to God. But the irony here is Joseph's father, Israel, isn't. And he's the character we overlook here at the end. But his dad literally goes into this massive upset, and he goes, you know what? I will never be happy again. I will never be fulfilled until I'm dead and with my son. And we realize that his dream, what God would have for him in his life as the parent, was entirely wrapped up in his son. He was his favorite. He was the one that he saw. He had these dreams of everybody bowing to him. And that dream that I had for my son and that I was living with and I was going with is just gone. It's because his reality and his fulfillment was wrapped up in Joseph. Not in anything God had for his own life, let alone for his family at large. And so the question you have to ask yourself today is, are you running your dream, whatever God's leading you to, through any of those 3 filters? What's your motivation? Are you letting the intent of your life be such that it's being messed up by what you feel led to do? Is it because it's not a good thing that you feel led to do? Because it's self-indulgent? Is it getting messed up because of the situations life throws at you that completely take your legs out from under you? Is it being messed up because people are trying to mess with you? And that, more than anything, is something you can't stomach. What is the thing that's trying to undermine what you have clearly established as God's dream for your life? Can I tell you that the way you're going to find this out, and the simple reality is, and it's a beautiful one, is when you find your gifting, when you find what God has given you and you purge the motivations that are self-driven and you go, how do I glorify God in this? What's God's deal in this whole deal? This is the answer to a question many of you had. How do I find God's will for my life? You do that. God's gifted you in some amazing ways. But are you using them for self things, like to just lift yourself up? Are you using it in a way that's going, how can I glorify God with this? Am I being motivated for the Lord? Am I not letting other people encumber that with their opinions and the worldly things that are out there? I'm just staying on course for what God would have for me. And if you do that, guess what? You find fulfillment because you're in the midst of the will of God for your life. Because it is essential to determine a godly trajectory if we ever hope to hit a fulfilling target. You can try so many other things. Can I tell you, there is a bottomless pit to fulfillment. And you're going to keep trying to throw things in it to fill up that hole in your life, and you're trying to find that bottom, and it's all these other things, and you're trying to see if it can just get some momentum, and the problem is there's not a bottom. And the infinite can only be filled with the infinite. Finite things that you are trying to cling to will never do it. Finite, self-indulgent dreams will never fulfill an infinite void in your life, but an infinite God will. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you that you are an infinite God who looks at us and says, you know what? I don't just want to come save you. I don't want to just send my son to save you so I can be in relationship with you. I want that. But I want so much more for you. Even in this day and this time and this season in your life, I want you to find fulfillment. I thank you that you speak that over my life and over our lives. I pray that we will have the wisdom, the fortitude, and the clarity to find that. Purge all the distractions. Purge all of our self-indulgent motives and just strive to what you have for us. Because at the end of that road and all the way down it is a fulfilling journey that leads to exactly where you would have us to be. It's your name we pray. Amen.